My name is David.
And my name is Slade.
And my name is Jason.
And this is Discern Realities, a Dungeon World podcast.
Hey, listeners, that unfamiliar voice you just heard is Slade Stolar from Scablands Press. Hey, Slade.
Hello.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, listeners, you may know that for the last couple of months, Slade and Scablands have been sponsoring Discern Realities, and David and I got talking, and we thought it'd be cool to have Slade on to talk about the indie hack a little bit. Yeah, thanks for coming on. I think this is going to be kind of a cool change of pace for us.
Yeah, we've been talking about having Slade on for months before we got sponsorships.
Because we'd been playing the indie hack. Yeah, so it was it's been on our radar. Why don't we just start by talking about maybe just like a little overview of the indie hack? Like, what is the indie hack?
The drive for me behind designing the indie hack was to make something really simple that was still very, very much story focused and giving the players a lot of control over the narrative. I think there are a lot of great OSR products that are doing this kind of minimalist thing, the black hack, white hack, into the odd, but I don't think there are quite as many of this type. I think Dungeon World starts down that path, and the indie hack just runs down that path.
Okay. I can kind of see where you're going with that, in the sense that Dungeon World still retains a lot of the sort of like mechanical tropes of Dungeons and Dragons. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, and it still has a lot of heft in terms of mechanical complexity. Yeah, I would say that's sort of the main thing. It still has a lot of the weight of rules behind it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. What are some of the things that sets the indie hack apart from, say, other fantasy games, either in terms of the setting or the rules, or just what, there are a lot of fantasy games out there, right? And I don't think every new fantasy game has to justify their existence, but it's helpful, right? Like to let us know what's different about it, right?
Sure. It's going kind of a minimalist direction. It has just 3 stats, tough, precise, and clever. You have the fairly familiar classes that you would see in most fantasy games. You're rolling 2d6 and applying some modifiers, so you actually get the same statistical distribution as you would with a PBTA game where you're rolling your 2d6 and adding your stat. But you also get these little nuggets of narrative control. You've talked about it on the podcast already, these little details that you get as a player to apply to what's happening in the scene, unless the roll goes badly, and then the GM gets these little nuggets and tries to make your life difficult.
And those details, that's the term of art, detail, that you're talking about from your game?
Yeah.
Well, we opened this up to some of our listeners via our G+ community, and we had some questions from them that we thought you might like to try and tackle. So, listener Chris asked, why would I try or buy the indie hack if my Dungeon World or my Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition game is already going great?
So, I would say, as my advice to people, definitely do not get this if you are fully 100% satisfied with your current gaming situation. If, on the other hand, you want to try something that has sort of similar themes, tropes, and worlds, but roughly as different an approach as Dungeon World from Dungeons & Dragons, I think the indie hack might work for you. It takes things, like I say, it takes things further. I think you need to have a sense of adventure to want to try this game.
Well, what do you mean by that? That sounds like a very loaded statement. Like, what do you mean you have to have a sense of adventure?
I think you have to want to try all the flavors. I'm that type of gamer. I want to play all the games.
Oh, yeah, I know. I feel you. I am 100% satisfied with my gaming, and I still try all the games. Hey, so I got to follow up real quick. You said Dungeon World goes down a certain path in terms of like being a fully sort of narrative system, and that the indie hack sort of runs down that path. What about World of Dungeons?
I think there's a happy medium to be had there in terms of minimalism. And I really enjoyed John Harper's designs, all of them. But I have to say about World of Dungeons is it doesn't quite give you all the tools that you need to use it from a cursory read of the text. I think you need to be good at you need to be awfully good at role playing already to get what John Harper's doing with World of Dungeons.
I think that's probably fair. I know that part of the reason why I've been able to be fairly successful with that very, very light system is because I have a lot of experience running fantasy games. I'm able to make calls on the fly to sort of like build rules and moves on top of that sort of like real simple system, right? So, and you're right. Like, I've had plenty of other people tell me, like, I don't have enough with World of Dungeons. Like, I can't make it go. So that's interesting. So you're suggesting that the indie hack is somewhere in the middle, right?
Well, I mean, in terms of page count, it definitely is in the middle.
Well, sure,
yeah. Other listener questions. Listener Jim, here's what he said. You stated on a thread in Google Plus that, quote, the indie hack fixes literally everything that's wrong with Dungeon World in the best possible way, end quote.
I remind you, we have a very large audience of people who love Dungeon World.
Yeah.
You may want to clarify that.
Please, please unpack this for us. He goes on to say, could you tell us what were the major design and philosophical problems you saw with Dungeon World and how indie hack fixes them? Okay,
so this is a little bit of my sense of humor, and listener Jim has slightly misquoted me. The end of that is in the best possible way, brackets, that I could think of, close brackets. so it's a little bit less extreme than that. No, I really enjoy Dungeon World as a game and as a text. I think it does lots of great things. I think Adam and Sage would come on this podcast and say they thought that they had fixed what was wrong with D&D in making it.
That's fair. Yeah. You see a thing and you want to do a better thing, right? That makes sense.
Right. And I don't know that the indie hack is a response to Dungeon World as such. I think what it really does is it sort of fixes the problems that I have with epic fantasy gaming in the ways that I think are best.
Well, let's give us some examples. What do you mean?
Well, maybe if I could turn back to Dungeon World for just a second and look at some of the things that Dungeon World borrows from D&D that it maybe didn't necessarily need to. So you've got stats. Now, you should have stats, but if you've got stats, why do you need bonuses? Or vice versa. If you've got your bonus and that's what's adding to your dice pool, why are we using stats? Strength gets used for encumbrance, but I'm not a huge fan of trying to track encumbrance. Your constitution is your base hit points, but I really don't like hit points. Let's get rid of hit points altogether. And you're not rolling under your stat as like a kind of saving throw. You're rolling defy danger and adding one of your bonuses. So I think get rid of stats.
When you say stats, you mean like the big number, right? Like if I have to assign some numbers, strength 16, dexterity 9, or whatever, right? You're suggesting that we don't need those numbers. We just need the modifiers.
Just the little number will do.
Sure. I mean, you've got something between 3 and 18, and that number tends not to make a lot of difference unless it's changing your modifier.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
I think alignment can probably go while we're minimalizing a game. So in my opinion, it's a prompt for the player to say to themselves, how can I be this stereotype when entering a situation? I feel like it's an excuse not to role play what your character's sort of moral and emotional state is all about, rather than an opportunity to be guided towards better role playing. So one of the things the Indie Hack does is it kind of gives you a boss. They tell you what to do, and it's up to you to decide whether or not you want to do it and your attitude to doing it. I mean, we've all done things that we're not really that keen on doing because the boss has said so. I feel like that is a more interesting moral question than saying, I am a chaotic person.
Let's stay there for a second, because that was one of the things that I really enjoyed when I ran the Indie Hack. I did a few sessions of it earlier this year. That was one of the aspects of it that I thought was really cool. It was called Masters, or your master, right? One of the players, their master was like a god. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. Another had a master it was the spirit of their dead father, and they had like a really complicated relationship, and that was pretty cool to explore. But then another one of the players, their master was more of like just a personal obsession. Like it was this woman that mentored them and raised them. Their master was like, how do I do right by this woman who I care so much about? How do I like honor her,
Right. No, I think that's really interesting. And I think it works on both levels. You can have a player who has no idea what they want to do in the game. And then you say, okay, well, you've got a master, some patron, some lord or religious order that is telling you what to do. And so don't worry about it. You just have to go and do the thing that they ask you to do. Or you can go all the way to the other side and say, I want this complex moral question to be the core of my being. And can I fulfill that? Can I stay true to those ideals? I mean, probably not if, what you're going out into is this crazy, dangerous world full of monsters and moral gray areas and magic and craziness.
Okay, so the master can be a literal, you have a boss, or it can be something much more metaphorical, like you have a personal obsession.
Sure. Or even better than that, you have a boss, but he tells you to do horrible things. So you find a way to assassinate him, and lacking a patron, you have to devise some kind of moral compass at that point.
All right. What else? What else are you clipping out to streamline your dungeoneering?
I think probably XP is probably something that's going out the window while we're removing things. It's a little bit less silly than alignment and HP, but it's still handed out in this weird, well, there's no stick, just this kind of carrot kind of way. I really like how the Black Hack handles this and says that the GM just allows everyone to level up after the level of the dungeon or after some big world-changing event, and says, okay, now everybody level. This is what a lot of dungeon masters and game masters have been doing for years anyways, because tracking XP is a pain in the rear. Let's see. I think monsters probably need a bit of a revision. I think Dungeon World is trying to sort of slowly creep in and murder D&D slowly.
It's very slow, but yeah.
Yeah. And I think the monsters kind of reflect that. I think they're almost a little bit too similar to what you're seeing in your standard modules. I mean, it's kind of part of the point is to be able to play these modules using Dungeon World, but kind of thrown out a lot of assumptions about monsters. And I've got a monster in there called the Creep. Yeah, he's the kind of person that's sort of on the edge, just on the edge of everything, and you want to know what he's up to, and you never really find a good answer, and he's just sort of driven by strange desires you'll never understand. I mean, it can't all be like an ogre with a facelift.
You got to have a Jack the Ripper type character, right?
Yeah. You have to have other strange goings on. So like undead cats, that's the thing in the indie hack, and it comes up a lot in the games that I've played.
That's great. All right, what else? What else would you like to streamline from Dungeon World into indie hack?
How about all of the polyhedral dice?
Oh man, someone's hissing right now because people love their polyhedrals.
Our dice collectors out there.
I know.
I'm not making any allies here today.
Okay.
So I think Apocalypse World, in one way or another, kind of proved that you don't always need a giant collection of multi-faced dice. Sometimes you can have 2d6. So is there anyone else I can offend? So bonds, it's not something that's kind of a hangover from D&D, but I'm not quite getting it, because it's something in the game that in essence is saying, once you're bored of this concept, cross it off and mark XP. Now, it doesn't say that in so many words. It says, as long as this bond is not a big factor in how we relate anymore. But to me, that's not really how complex adventure-y relationships ought to work. You should have things that move forward by getting more complicated, not less. and usually after some big crazy crisis, or you almost died, or
I agree. I totally agree. I think that's one of the reasons why bonds are not great. My follow-up there is, what sort of like bonding mechanisms exist in the indie hack? Like, how do you handle it in the indie hack?
So you get something a little bit similar to, in shape to a bond. You get this kind of statement that talks about how you relate to another character. But what happens is these build up until you've got 4 of them, and then you have some kind of crisis in your relationship. So the relationship has gotten so complicated and so fraught that it has to break. And it can break where you take something positive out of it, they take something positive out of it, you take something negative out of it, they take something negative out of it, or you each take something different or the same thing. So you can you turn 4 relationships into 1 or 2. So the relationship gets more complex, you have a crisis, and it kind of simplifies or consolidates.
When I read the text of the indie hack, I thought that was super interesting. And bonds were the first thing I thought of. I was like, oh, this is actually like kind of it's like we're building on top of a thing rather than taking a thing away. And that speaks to me in a big way. Yeah, no, I'm into this idea of like something that's more like additive, right? As opposed to something that subtracts. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
Right. And my favorite part as GM with those is when someone tells me what the relationship is, and I guess whether or not it's a positive relationship or a negative one, because it's not always clear from the way that it's written.
That's by design, right? I mean, you want it to be like kind of maybe sometimes a little ambiguous, or
I think it says something about the person if they say. So let's say the exorcist in our group. Let's say I have a relationship with them, and it's used to be in a relationship with my cousin. Is that positive or is that negative? Do I appreciate them kind of being in my extended social circle, or have they offended my family in some way? It's not always clear just from that description, and I like people taking kind of juxtaposed relationship and then the relationship type, positive or negative.
And to be clear, these relationships, they have a mechanical benefit, right? Like all the details. They're just details like anything else in the game, right? And they have like a mechanical, like they're basically a button you can press, right, to get a bonus.
So in playtesting, we actually didn't use them in that way, but I think that's a fantastic way to use them. And when I heard that someone was doing that, I said, that is awesome. It's not something that my play group did very much with them, but absolutely yes, exploit them like a detail and get your mechanical bonus. And hope to goodness you don't consolidate that relationship and lose that really interesting aspect of that relationship.
Right.
Nice.
Well, okay, so I promised you a response, right? So here's the thing. I think that one of the beautiful things about Dungeon World that Adam and Sage did with Dungeon World is they retained a lot of the D&D tropes, sometimes seemingly just for the sake of retaining them, right? The stats are a great example of that, right? Like those numbers don't mean much, right? Like they only have meaning in the context of, like you said, when they bump your modifier up. They could have easily done it just like Apocalypse World does, where you just occasionally bump up the modifier. I think one of the genius things that they did in keeping all of that D&D stuff, like alignment and hit points and the polyhedrals, was they made the game like incredibly more accessible to people, right? Like they were able to reach a much, much bigger audience because they kept all those D&D things. And I think that was really, really smart of them. But here's the thing, and here's where I'm with you on this, Slade. I think that Dungeon World's been around for a long time now, well, for like, 4 or 5 years or something like that. And I think that people, especially regular players of Dungeon World, are probably like, they don't need that anymore. Like I don't think that's necessarily like, okay, I don't need these little like throwback cookies anymore, to make my, to force myself to have a good time here. Like I'm willing to take the game on its terms and go in a bunch of different directions. And I don't need the sort of comfort of hit points and stats and alignment and all that stuff, right? We talk a lot about like, if Dungeon World, we're going to have a second edition, like what will we do? Like what would our version of Dungeon World look like? And I think like the indie hack is a really, really, to me, like I think it's a cool response to this idea of, okay, we've been introduced to these ideas of like how you can run a fantasy game. Like, let's take it one step further. And yeah, I think it's a totally legit conversation to say, what are the things that Dungeon World is doing that we can strip away because frankly, they're not needed anymore. So yeah, I'm with you on that. It's an interesting, I think it's an interesting conversation, maybe like to have at a longer time somewhere else in another place. But sure. I just want to throw that out there though, because I do think that you do see a lot of this like activity around like improving, like making fantasy, gaming a little bit more narrative focused. And I think the indie hack is part of that. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. I agree. I think that Dungeon World did those things very intentionally to attract and be familiar to the intended audience of Dungeons and Dragons players. Do you feel like a Dungeons and Dragons player could come and play the indie hack, or would they need to learn Dungeon World first? Like,
is indie hack, is that running too fast?
Is that running too fast down this path that I'm?
Yeah, like if you were coming straight from trad games, right?
I think the transmission would make an ugly noise if you went straight from like very, very traditional, very old school, like lots of GM fiat, lots of dice tables into indie hack. But I think if you've thrown some dice with like Vincent Baker's games or John Harper's games, I don't think that this is really too much of a mind bender.
Awesome. Well, we've got some more questions. Listener Christopher asks, what are your next goals for the indie hack? Revisions with details to answer most commonly asked questions? New character classes? A monster manual? Something else?
It sounds like listener Christopher has some really good ideas about what I should be doing next. So, yeah, Christopher's a kind soul. So I'm planning to release something every 2 months. It makes me a little bit sad when indie publishers use this sort of fire and forget approach, and the game comes out and then it's kind of it's an artwork that stands on its own. It's not that I disagree with their artistic interpretation. It's just that I want more of that artwork.
I agree. Oh man, I agree 100%.
So I'm trying to do a not fire and forget kind of approach. So in September, the indie hack came out. In November, I published Noises in the Old Theater, which was a collaboration with my artist, who is awesome. And so based on that timeline, in January, I need to put something out.
You've got a lot of room here to do some cool stuff. I mean, Slade, the system is like, it seems like the system is wide open to like be hacked and to have, people do some things.
And just a last thing, I think Dungeon World is awesome, and I didn't mean any of it.
When I'm back.
Just use it. Just play it. I mean, it's what I would be playing if someone said, "Here, go and run this module," before I develop the indie hack.
Cool. Well, this has been really interesting. We've always said that this show, Discern Realities, was modeled off Dragon Magazine. And Dragon Magazine didn't always just cover Dungeons and Dragons.
Let's move on to our next segment. Our next segment is What Here is Useful or Valuable to Me. Listeners, we're going to be looking at a couple of our compendium classes from our compendium class contest. If you'd like to hop into that contest, it is still going. It's going to go until January 15th, 2017. And if you want to submit your compendium class, you can submit it on one of our Google Plus posts, or you can email it to gauntletpodcast@gmail.com. And if you win, you will win a $50 gift card to either Amazon or DriveThruRPG. A winner and the two runners-up that Jason and I select will get invited to come on the show as well. Jason and Slade, what have you got? Start with you, Jason.
Okay, so I chose The Revenant. This is by Michael Barford. When you have passed beyond the Black Gate with revenge still burning in your heart. That's how I'm going to pass beyond the Black Gate. Just throwing that out there. Erupt from your shallow grave and grasp vengeance. You may take this move immediately upon your resurrection. Spirit of Vengeance. You have lost your sense of identity, but have been granted a supernatural endurance. Erase your character's name and add 10 to your total hit points. If you are the Spirit of Vengeance, these count as class moves for you. You can choose from them when you level up. So these are the class moves. These are the more advanced moves. Vendetta. Your soul is guided by a solitary purpose. Erase your character's alignment. Oh, there you go, Slade. This compendium class just starts to strip it away altogether.
Oh, it does so many great things. I love this one.
Erase your character's alignment and race and add this question to the Discern Realities list. What is the quickest route to revenge? When you act on the answer, in addition to gaining a +1 forward, mark XP. That's powerful. Solitary undertaking. Your allies only get in the way of your mission. When you roll 6-, you may erase one of your character's bonds and treat the result as a 7 and 9.
Yeah.
This is, man, they wrote this one just for you, Slade. Vengeful Visage. Your appearance is twisted by your strong desire. When you parlay, you don't need leverage if you erase one description of your look. Ultimate Vengeance. The moment you have been waiting for is finally here. When vengeance is at hand, you may successfully acquire it. Nothing will stand in your way. Destroy your character sheet, preferably with fire, and describe with great relish how your character achieves ultimate vengeance. Keep in mind, sometimes the best revenge is a life well lived. I really love this CC. This is so good. This is a really, really awesome CC, Michael. I'm very, very into it. Okay, what did you choose, Slade?
I mean, nothing gets destroyed with fire, but it's still pretty good. So this is the Oneironaut from Will P. The alternate name is the Dreamer, and you'll see why in just a sec. When you've spent a year in meditation with the yogis of the Shakyamuni Mountain clan, the next time you gain a level, you can choose this move instead of a move from your class. Reality check. When you witness something impossible in real life, such as magic, you may roll plus wisdom. On a 10+, hold 2 lucid. On a 7-9, hold 1 lucid. You may never hold more than 3 lucid at one time. Lose all lucid whenever you fall asleep. But at any time, spend 1 lucid to change an established detail in a scene, change something about yourself until you fall asleep, or summon a simple object or weapon. If you have reality check, you may take one of the following moves when you level up. Awakened. The waking world bends to your whims. At any time, you may spend 2 lucid to attempt something impossible within the fiction. Roll Defy Danger to see what happens. Limitless. At any time, you may spend 1 lucid to volley with wisdom. Your damage die increases to D10, and you may choose to have either the forceful or the messy tag. If you would choose to reduce your ammo by 1, instead spend 1 additional lucid. Only a guest. At any time, you may spend 1 lucid to change established details of a hostile creature.
Awesome. I like that one too. Well, that's a very, very good good compendium class.
Yeah, really cool.
Yeah. Two good entries for sure. Sweet. Let's move on to our next segment. Our next segment is What is About to Happen?
This is our ongoing comic strip AP featuring the adventures of Ramshackle Crow. And when we last saw Ramshackle, he had been confronted by his old mentor, Catspaw Patterson. He shoved Catspaw into the vault with the Titanic Guardian that's inside the vault. Catspaw managed to pull Scabs in with him, and that is where we're at. So we see Catspaw. Catspaw kind of stands up, and he's got that chain, right? That chain and that hook. And Scabs is kind of tangled up in it, right? And we see Catspaw, like, you can kind of barely just, from the distance you're at, looking inside the vault, you can see Catspaw, like, he kind of like smiles, right? Like his desiccated, sort of worm-ridden skin on his face like stretches across, and you can kind of see his exposed, like teeth and gums and things like that, right? And he thinks he's got the upper hand on Scabs, right? At the very least. But he may not be aware of the Guardian, and in fact he is not. You see on camera, we just see that big, huge sword of the Guardians swing down like a pendulum into frame and just knock the shit out of Catspaw and send him flying, okay?
Okay.
But Scabs is still there, tangled up in the chain, and you can see that the Guardian is stepping forward and getting ready to either stomp on Scabs or he's going to smash Scabs with the sword. In any case, what do you do?
So he's like got it wrapped around him a lot or a little bit?
I think he's just like kind of, I think this is all just happening really quickly, and he got pulled in, and he's like he's kind of on his face, and the chain is kind of like wrapped around him a little bit, right? He was already hooked by the chain. And I think he's just like struggling to kind of get to his feet.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to try and distract the Guardian from doing any further action by running out there and throwing my 10 coins at him.
You're going to run into the vault and try to distract the Guardian?
Yeah.
Okay. Give me a defy danger with dexterity, please.
10.
Nice. You will be able to get Scabs out of the vault. Go ahead and describe what that looks like.
So I go running into the vault, and I'm digging into my coin purse, furiously just trying to get coins in my hand. And I'm throwing them, and I'm bouncing them off of the walls so that they make noise when they hit the wall, and they make noise when they hit the Guardian. The Guardian is distracted by it successfully, so I can kind of grab onto Scabs and kind of haul him to his feet and push him out of the vault as I'm like still like bouncing these coins off of everywhere.
Nice. And you guys managed to get out of the vault to safety. As you get Scabs out of the vault, do you just like slam the vault door closed to keep Cat's Paw in there?
Yeah.
And as you're doing that, as soon as you slam the thing closed, or maybe shortly thereafter, as you're kind of collecting your breath, right, and kind of taking stock of your situation, you start to notice that swirling red sky, that is in this sort of subplane that you're in, you start to notice that like streaks of lightning are filling the sky, or like some kind of like electricity in the air, right? You start to see these crackling shocks across the sky, right? You can see them and hear them. And you notice that the terrain that you're on is beginning to like sort of break up. Like you can hear like the crunching and cracking of rocks, and you see like bits of debris and rocks like floating up into the air as if this piece of terrain is just breaking apart. What do you do?
I look at Scabs, and I'm trying to help him get untangled from the chain and get the hook out of him. I'm like, we probably should just grab our lines and climb out of here. This doesn't look stable at all.
Scabs looks back at the mirrored glass vault door with longing in his eyes, knowing that you guys are leaving behind a no doubt incredibly valuable treasure. And then he turns to you and says, right, I think that's probably what we ought to do. And he grabs his line, and you guys begin running out, basically, right? Yeah, so what do? Do you guys just like head for the sort of like rift that you came through to get into this subplane?
Yeah, I mean, how quickly is this place tumbling apart? It seems like it's going pretty quick.
Quickish, yeah. I mean, it's. I think as long as you like make your way towards the exit, you should be fine. It's but if you dawdle, it's going to be a problem, right?
Yeah, I look longingly back at the vault, thinking about how dangerous it was to get that stupid door open, and how it's going to be my turn next and not Scab's turn. Like, well, do you want to chance the Guardian again, or?
No, let's just go. Let's just get out of here. I prefer not to be ripped apart by whatever force is doing this, he says, looking around at, the increasingly dense amount of like rocks that are breaking apart and floating up into the sky, creating something of a tiny asteroid field in the red lightning streaked sky.
I tend to agree with you. Plus, Cat's Paw's in there now, and him and the Guardian can have their way. We've got his hook. Let's go. That's a treasure. Let's get out of here.
Yep, I think that counts.
Counts for me.
You guys run to where you believe the exit should be, and you see something of a problem. It's not there. And you're suddenly aware of your lines no longer being attached to you. Oh, what do we do now, Ramshackle?
You couldn't turn into anything with wings, could you?
Even if I could, where are we supposed to fly to?
I don't know, but...
This is a subplane. It's a pocket dimension. Unless you've got a way of getting out, you're just stuck. This thing might be closing in on itself. We have no idea what's about to happen.
Oh, of course, but
you can see now that his orange flesh is doing that roiling thing it does when he's nervous, right? Like bumps, like running up and down his, up and down his arms, like a sine wave, right? They get bigger and bigger the more nervous he gets. You can definitely see he's not feeling great.
All right, Scabs, just calm down. You're getting all worked up, and help me look for a way out of this situation.
We're gonna die, no. Ramshackle. We're gonna die.
God damn you! I told you. No irrationalness. It will not save us to just worry about dying. Help me look. I'm looking over the edge to see if maybe the entrance shifted downward. That's been known to happen. I'm looking up. I'm digging in the ground. I'm thinking about moving sideways through other dimensional space.
Roll Discern Realities.
Yeah, that's 4.
You are suddenly aware of a woman in the same general vicinity as you. She is wearing sort of a gray traveling cloak and leathers that are dyed kind of a dark color. And she has a hood raised and a sort of mask on her face. She's approaching the two of you. It's almost like she just blinked into existence. You don't even know where she came from. She approaches you and says, Catspaw Patterson is still fundamentally anchored to the lands beyond the Black Gate of Death. And when he entered this space, he created a distortion, a disturbance that is now causing it to collapse in upon itself. I fear things aren't looking good. And she holds out her right hand, and in her hand she has, it looks to be like kind of a small bar, okay? Like a sort of shiny, glossy, black bar. And she takes her other hand, her index finger on her other hand, takes her fingertip and moves it along this little bar, like rubbing it. And as she does that, she's mumbling something. You can't make out the words because she's saying them quietly, and also she has mask on, just like sort of like robber's mask, right? Like a piece of, like a scarf or something tied over her face. She's mumbling something. And then that little bar kind of floats up from her hand and begins to spin. Okay, and it has like a sort of a glow to it. Maybe there were some sigils or something on it. And that glowing as it spins is creating like a sort of helix of purplish light, okay? That's getting bigger and bigger around her. And she says, I fear I can only take one of you with me. What do you do?
I say, if it's good enough for 2, it's me and Scabs. And we go running forward.
We'll leave it there.
And that just leaves one final question. Who's really in control here?
Hey, so normally this is where I rattle off a bunch of stuff about where to find us, and I'm going to do that still too. But before I do that, I just want to say that this is our final episode of 2016. Listeners, we have been doing Discern Realities now for 1 year. Thank you so much for your support. This has been such a fun show to put together, and it was received so well almost out of the gate, and we really love doing it. And we're glad you've been with us this last year to make this awesome show.
Yeah, it's been really fantastic. It's been really special to be a part of the show. I mean, just the listener support from the get-go we've gotten. You guys are writing us 5-star reviews on iTunes. You putting us up for Golden Geek Awards. I feel like you appreciate us so much, and that's a big part of why we keep coming back and doing more.
Okay, one thing before we go, I want to mention something that you guys are going to really like, I think, listeners. So we used to do that comic strip AP on this show featuring Domenico Castafale. Remember him? We have just launched a brand new AP for Domenico Castafiel on our other podcast, Comic Strip AP. We talked about it last episode. So go check that out. It's really good, if I do say so myself. It is really, really enjoyable. All of these Comic Strip APs are really awesome. Go check out the Domenico one. We're working really hard to give you that. You know, if you remember the one we did for this show, that very like sort of body horror, kind of strange sexuality, lush sort of like setting. We're kind of doing that again. So if you enjoyed the Domenico AP, go check out the new one on Comic Strip AP. So continuing that character story. We can be found on our website, gauntlet-rpg.com. We are on Twitter at gauntletrpg. We do have a sort of a way of monetary compensation. You can go to Patreon and support us there. It's patreon.com/gauntlet, although we put every single red cent back into all of our activities. So, and Slade, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you so much for sponsoring the show these last couple of months. It helps pay for all of our hosting fees, and it essentially keeps the lights on, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, I was listening to it for free for like a year, and just getting free entertainment. It was
easy decision.
It was terrible.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you, Jason.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Slade.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, listeners. That's our show. That sounds awful. Like, that's the only thing I can hold over any cat that I meet, that I could kill it. Now it can't die.
Oh God, David. Maybe we'll edit that out.
I'm joking.
Right. But if you do the correct ritual and bind it in twine and burn it in the city square, it won't come back. As long as you follow the correct procedure.